and welcome to Fireside Fairytales. My name is Rory, and you are watching Varietal Literature's YouTube page. We're also a web page, varietal-literature.ca, which is a group of writers from Vancouver who just like to have fun with narrative. If you want to read our own original works, you can check out varietal-literature.ca. There is links down below. But what we're doing tonight is we're reading old school fairy tales by the fireside. And we do this every Tuesday at 6:30. So if you do enjoy tonight and you're curious about the other ones, there's a whole playlist of it on the channel. If you are checking in on this not live, if you're coming back to this as it was pre-recorded, you should know that there are timestamps in the description below, which allow you to jump ahead to specific tales. And tonight, it's going to be a little shorter of a show. We are reading two tales. The first one is the one that's referenced in the video's title and the icon, which is the giant who had no heart. Dear. Though it's not the good guy anyways. But the second story we're going to read is called The Honest Penny. And they don't really have a lot in common. Like, if I can, sometimes I do a theme, but I wouldn't say that tonight has a specific theme. They're just sort of two interesting tales from, well, relatively similar areas, because they're all coming from a collection that I had bought called Nordic Tales. Again, I'm not like funded by this or anything. I just thought the art was really cool. And within this book, it's folktales from Norway, Sweden, Finland, Iceland, and Denmark. Holly's House says, 2 tales? 2 for 1? Be still, my cheap Scottish heart. I also have a Scottish heart. I'm Scottish Norwegian. Well, I'm Canadian, but, you know, that's meaningless. But this is a bunch of public domain tales, and this is like the first one we're going to read, The Giant Who Had No Heart. There's some pretty art with it. We're going to be reading the original version from the original text, but Honest Penny is also in this book. And if we have any tech problems, we'll just read from the book, which we have had some tech problems lately. So that's the show. That's what we're doing. I see that GS and Holly's House are in the chat. It's really good to see you folks again. I'm not going to waste any time. The first one is more of an adventure, I guess. And the second one, it's just odd. The second one's an odd one. GS says, I already feel bad for the Heartless Giant. Well, you should know that normally the giants are the villain in Norwegian tales. And this is a Norwegian tale. Okay, so let's get right to it. Let's not waste time. This is from a book called Round the Yule Log, which is confusing because the guy who edited this together, Asbjornsen, also made another book called Round the Yule Log that is nothing to do with this. Go figure. But yeah, this is Asbjornsen, who is a collector of Norwegian tales. And this one is called The Giant Who Had No Heart. There was once upon a time a king who had 7 sons. He loved them all so much that he could never do without them all at once. One always had to be with him. When they were grown up, 6 of them set out to woo, but the father kept the youngest son at home. And for him, the others were to bring back a princess to the palace. The king gave the 6 the finest clothes you'd ever set your eyes upon, and you could see the glitter of them a long way off. And each had his own horse, which cost many, many hundreds of dollars. And so they set out on the journey. After having been to so many royal palaces and seen all the princesses there, they came at last to a king who had 6 daughters, such lovely princesses they had never seen. And so each of them began wooing one of the 6 sisters, and when they got them for sweethearts, they set out for home again. But they quite forgot to bring a princess with them, for Ashipatal, who was left at home, so busy were they making love to their sweethearts. So that name, Ashpital, is, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing. I couldn't really find a definitive pronunciation of it. I'm sorry. It has an asterisk there, and the footnote says it's a typical character. It's a play on a word that kind of means Cinderella. And then there's a footnote to that in this version, to the footnote, that says, well, the word derives from a similar thing as Cinderella, like flame, fire, Cinderella. It actually doesn't mean that. What it just means, apparently, as a play on, is the character of a young prince. Or the youngest prince. Make of that what you will. When they journeyed a good bit out of the way, they'd pass close to the side of a steep mountain where there was a giant's castle. As soon as the giant saw them, he came out and turned them all, princes and princesses, into stone. But the king waited and waited for his 6 sons, but no sons came. He was very sad and said that he should never be glad again. "Had you not been left to me," he said to Ashipatale, "I should not care to live any longer. I am so sad because I have lost your brothers. But I have been thinking to ask for leave to set out and find them. I have," said Ashipatale. "No, I cannot let you go," said his father. "I shall lose you as well." But Ashipatale would go, and he begged and prayed till the king gave him leave to go. The king had no other horse to give him but an old jade, for his 6 brothers and their men had taken all the other horses. But Ashipatale did not mind that. He mounted the shabby old nag. "Goodbye, father," said he to the king. "I shall come back, sure enough. And who knows, but I shall have my 6 brothers with me as well." And off he started. Well, when he got a bit on his way, he came to a raven, which was lying in the road, flapping his wings. He was unable to get out of his way. It was so famished. "Oh, dear friend, give me something to eat." "I will help you in your utmost need," said the raven. "Very little food have I," said the prince, "and you don't look as if you could help me much either. But a little I must give you, for I want it badly, I see." And then he said, for you want it badly, I see, I should say. And then he gave the raven some of the food he had with him. When he had traveled some distance further, he came to a stream. There he saw a big salmon, which he got ashore and was dashing and knocking himself about and could not get into the water again. "Oh, dear friend, help me into the water again," said the salmon to the prince, "and I will help you in your utmost need." "I don't suppose it can be much of a help you can give me," said the prince, "but it is a pity you should lie there and very likely perish." So he shoved the fish into the stream again. So he traveled a long, long way, till he met a wolf. It's about to get weird. Just a warning. Which was so famished that he was only able to drag himself along the road. "Dear friend, give me your horse," said the wolf. "I am so hungry. I hear the wind whistling in my empty stomach. Oh, I have had nothing to eat for 2 years. Arr." "No," said Ashipatale, "I can't do that. First I came to a raven which I had to give all my food to. Then I came to a salmon which I had to help back into the water. And now you want my horse. But that is impossible, for then I should have nothing to ride upon." Yes, my friend, but you must help me," said the wolf. "You can ride on me instead. I shall help you again in your utmost need." "Well, the help you can give me will not be great. I suppose you must have the horse then, since you are so needy," said the prince. And when the wolf had finished the horse, being real gentle about this, ate his living horse. Ashi Patel took the bridle and put the bit in the wolf's mouth and the saddle on his back. And the wolf felt now so strong, I bet, and well after he had to eat, that he set off with his prince as if he were nothing at all. Ashi Patel had never ridden so fast before. When we get a little bit further, I will show you a giant's castle, said the wolf. In a little while they came there. See, here is the giant's castle, said the wolf again, and there you see all your 6 brothers, whom the giant has turned into stone. And there are 6 brides. Over yonder is the door of the castle. You must go in there. I dare not, said the prince. The giant will kill me. Not at all, answered the wolf. When you go in there, you will meet a princess. She'll tell you what to make of an end of it, how to do an end to the giant. What to do to make an end of the giant. Man, I stumbled on that. Only do as she tells you. Well, Ashi Patel went into the castle, but to tell the truth, he felt rather afraid. When he got inside, he found the giant was out, but in a chamber sat the princess, just as the wolf had said. Such a lovely maiden Ashi Patel had never seen before. Good heavens! What has brought you here? Said the princess, as soon as she saw him. It's sure to be your death. No one can kill the giant who lives here, for he hasn't got any heart. But now, when I am here, I suppose I'd better try my strength with him, said Ashi Patel, and I must see if I can't release my brothers, who are standing outside there, turned into stone, and I will try to save you as well. Well, since you will stop, we must try and do the best we can, said the princess. You must creep under the bed over there, and listen well to what he says when I speak with him. Be sure to lie as quiet as you can. So Ashi Patel crept under the bed, and no sooner had he done than the giant came home. What a smell of Christian blood there is here, shouted the giant. Yes, a magpie flew over the house with a man's bone and let it fall down the chimney, said the princess. I made haste to throw it out, but the smell doesn't go away so soon. So the giant said no more about it, and when evening came they went to bed. And when they'd lain a while, the princess said, There is one thing I wanted so very much to ask you about, if I only dared. Well, what can that be? Asked the giant. I should so like to know where your heart is, since you don't carry it about you, said the princess. Oh, there's a thing you needn't know anything about, said the giant. But if you must know, it's under the stone slab in front of the door. Aha! We shall soon see if we can find that, said Ashi Paddle to himself under the bed. Keep it down, Ashi. Next morning the giant got up very early and set out for the wood, but no sooner was he out of sight than Ashi Patel and the princess commenced looking for the heart under the door slab. But although they dug and searched all they could not find anything. He has made a fool of me this time, said the princess, but I must try him again. So she picked up all the prettiest flowers she could find and strewed them over the door slab, which they put... inhaled my own hair. Which they put in its right place again. When the time came for the giant to return home, Ashi Patel crept under the bed, and he'd scarcely got well under before the giant came in. What
What a smell of Christian blood there is here,
screamed the giant. Yes, a magpie flew over the house and dropped a man's bone down the chimney, said the princess. I made haste to clear it away, but I suppose the smell hasn't gone away yet. So the giant said no more about it. Though I gotta be honest, it's really specific. Giant probably should have had some suspicions at this point. But in a little while he asked about who it was that had been strewing flowers around the door slab. Why, I, of course, said the princess.
And what's the meaning of it?
Asked the giant. Well, you know I am so fond of you, said the princess, that I couldn't help doing it then. I knew that your heart was lying under there.
Indeed,
said the giant.
But it isn't there after all.
When they'd gone to bed in the evening, the princess asked again where his heart was, because she was so very fond of him. She said that she would like to know it.
It's over in the cupboard on the wall there, said the giant.
Aha! Thought both Ashipatel and the princess. We will soon try to find it. Next morning the giant was early out of bed and made for the wood again. But the moment he was gone, Ashipatel and the princess were looking in the cupboard for the heart, but they looked and searched and found no heart. Well, we must try once more, said the princess. She hung flowers and garlands around the cupboard, and when the evening came, Ashipatel crept under the bed again. Shortly, the giant came in. He roared.
What is the smell of Christian blood there is here?
Yes, a magpie flew past here just now and dropped a man's bone down the chimney, said the princess. I made haste to throw it out, but I suppose that's what you still smell. When the giant heard this, he said no more about it. But as soon as he saw the cupboard decked out with flowers and garlands, he asked who it was that had done it. It was the princess, of course.
But what is the meaning of all this foolery?
Asked the giant. Well, you know how fond I am of you, said the princess. I couldn't help doing it. When I knew your heart was there.
How can you be so foolish to believe it? Said the giant.
Well, how can I help believing you when you say so? Answered the princess.
Oh, you are a foolish creature,
said the giant.
You can never go where my heart is.
Ah, well, said the princess. But I should like to know for all that where it is. So the giant could not refuse to tell her any longer, and he said,
Far, far away, in a lake lies an island. On that island stands a church. In that church there is a well. In that well swims a duck. In that duck there is an egg. And in the egg, well, there is my heart.
Early next morning, almost before the dawn of day, the giant set out for the wood again. Well, I suppose I'd better start as well, said the Ashipatel. I wish I only knew the way. He said farewell to the princess for a time, and when he came outside, there was the wolf still waiting for him. He told the wolf what had happened inside, and that he was now going to set out for the well in the church. If he only knew the way. The wolf asked him to jump on his back. He would try and find the way sure enough, he said. And away they went over the hills and mountains, over fields and valleys, while the wind whistled about them. When they'd traveled many, many days, they came at last to a lake. The prince did not know how he should get across it, but the wolf asked him only not to be afraid. And then he plunged into the water with the prince on his back and swam across the island. And when they came to the church, they found the key for the church door hanging high, high up on the steeple. At first the young princess didn't know how to get a hold of it.
"You will have to call the raven,"
said the wolf, which the prince did. The raven came at once and flew up for the key, and so the prince got inside the church. And when he came to the well, the duck was there sure enough. It was swimming about just as the giant had said. He commenced calling, and at last he lured her up to him and caught her. But just as he was lifting her out of the water, the duck let the egg fall in the well. And Ashipatel didn't know how to get it up again.
"You'd better call the salmon,"
said the wolf, which the prince did. The salmon came and fetched the egg from the bottom of the well. The wolf then told him to squeeze the egg. As soon as Ashipatel squeezed it, they heard the giant screaming.
"Squeeze it once more,"
said the wolf. And when the prince did so, the giant screamed still more piteously and prayed so nicely and gently for himself. He would do all the prince wished if he only wouldn't squeeze his heart to pieces. It's never established how they shrunk days of travel in a moment. But, don't think too much about it. If he only wouldn't squeeze his heart to pieces.
"Tell him that if he will give you back again alive your 6 brothers and their brides, which he turned into stone, you'll spare his life,"
said the wolf, and Ashipatel did so. Yes, the giant would do that at once, and he restored the 6 princes and the 6 princesses to life.
"Now, squeeze the egg to pieces,"
said the wolf, and Ashipatel squeezed it flat in his hands, and the giant burst. Not really a Disney ending there. So when Ashipatel got rid of the giant, he rode back again on his friend, the wolf, to the giant's castle, and there stood all his 6 brothers and their brides, all alive. And then Ashipatel went into the mountain for his own bride, and they all set out for their home and royal palace, the royal palace. The old king was pleased, I can tell you, when all his 7 sons came back, each with his bride. "But the loveliest of the princesses is Ashipatel's bride, after all," said the king, "and he shall sit at the top of the table with her." And then the wedding came off, and the king gave a grand feast which lasted for many a day. And if they have not done feasting by this, why, they are still at it. Well, there's a few things in chat's going. She only has 1 story. Yeah, it's strange to me that they didn't come up with anything more than 1 story. How big is this duck? Let's assume it's the size of 2 full-grown men, because that's funny. Oh well, I did not figure out that his heart was in a duck in a well. Why not? It was all there. Gotta read the subtext. What did the salmon do to help? When he picked the duck up, the egg fell out into the well. They called the salmon to bring it back up. Holly's house says, must be like the penguin's duck in Tim Burton's Batman. Well, there you go. Size of 2 men. GS says, I want to feast for many a day. I agree. What kind of food would you guys eat for many a day? I don't know. I really like sleeping. Like, does that include sleeping, or are you expected to stay awake for days? Holly's house says the only girl left that didn't get married by the first 6 brothers was the loveliest. Unlikely. She was the one, I believe, unless I misunderstood, she was the one that was held captive by the giant. So they wouldn't have seen her. Alright. GS says they would feast on mashed potatoes. Really, for days. Yorkshire pudding, I can see that. Pastry and stuff is deadly. Honestly, don't know what I would eat for days. Okay, well, our second story is called The Honest Penny. It comes from the same guy as Bjornsson, but it's from a book called Tales from the Fjeld. GS is not very Norwegian. Yeah, I mean, Norwegian is a lot of sort of like cured fish and meats, berries, harvest greens. Holly's House says, I concur, roast beef for days. I don't know. I mean, if you've had some fatty roast beef, there's only so much you can eat. It's a lot. The honest penny is not that long, so I suspect we will finish probably earlier than normal. Yeah, just so everybody has awareness. Anyways, the thing that I liked about our last story, was this. I always find it really curious the way that stories contend with empathy over different eras, because, like, it's interesting that they show him being very kind to these random animals in the road, to the extent that he's, giving away a horse, another living thing that he needs for travel, to some random wolf. And yet there is no empathy for the giant, nor is there any sense of honor in his word. Like, there's no point in him honoring his word, which is a little bit more of an old world kind of view, which is sort of the good and the clean and the right don't really owe anything to the distorted and strange and old, and he's royalty and whatever else. Like, it's kind of arbitrary, and it's up to them who they decide is worthy of their empathy and so on. That's a very old world ethics thing, and I just found it interesting the way that you would expect him to somehow be obligated to keep his word, and yet no, he just kills him. I mean, is it the wrong choice given the context of the story? Probably not. The wolf is the one who tells him to do it. Maybe there's something to that. Anyways, I find stuff like that interesting. The observations, the things that we wouldn't do in a story today. I find that some of the most interesting stuff, because it tells you a lot about, how was ethics and what was important for children to know, because a lot of these were made for children in a different time. Anyways, this story is from a book called The Tales from Fjeld, a second series of popular tales, also from Asbjornsen. This particular tale is called The Honest Penny, like my niece. Once on a time, there was a poor woman who lived in a tumble-down hut far away in the wood. Little had she to eat and nothing at all to burn, and so she sent a little boy she had out into the wood to gather fuel. He ran and jumped and ran to keep himself warm, for it was a cold gray autumn day, and every time he found a bough or root for his billet, he had to beat his arms across his breasts, for his fists were as red as the cranberries over which he walked, for very cold. So when he had got his billet of wood and was off home, he came upon a clearing of stumps on the hillside, and there he saw a white crooked stone. "Ah, you poor old stone," said the boy. "How white and wan you are. I'll be bound you are frozen to death." And with that he took off his jacket and laid it on the stone. So when he got home with his billet of wood, his mother asked what it all meant that he'd walked about in wintry weather in his shirt sleeves. Then he told her how he'd seen an old crooked stone which was all white and wan for frost, and how he'd given it his jacket. "What a fool you are," said his mother. "Do you think a stone can freeze? But even if it froze till it shook again, know this, everyone is nearest to his own self. It costs quite enough to get clothes to your back, without your going and hanging them on stones in the clearings." And as she said that, she hunted the boy out of the house to fetch his jacket. So when he came where the stone stood, lo, it had turned itself and lifted itself up on one side from the ground. Yes, yes, this is since you got the jacket, poor old thing, said the boy. But when he looked a little closer at the stone, he saw a money box full of bright silver under it. This is stolen money, no doubt, thought the boy. No one puts money, come by honestly, under a stone away in the wood. So he took the money box and bore it down to a tarn hard by and threw the whole hoard into the tarn. But one silver penny piece floated to the top of the water. Aha! That is honest, said the lad, for what is honest never sinks. So he took the silver penny and went home with it in his jacket. Then he told his mother how it all happened, how the stone had turned itself, and how he had found a money box full of silver money, which he'd thrown into the tarn because it was stolen money, and how one silver penny floated up on the top. That I took, said the boy, because it was honest. You are a born fool, said his mother, for she was very angry. Were not else honest that what floats on water? There wouldn't be much honesty in the world. Even though the money were stolen 10 times over, still you'd found it. And I tell you again what I told you before. Everyone is nearest to his own self. Had you only taken the money, we might have lived well and happily all our days. But ne'er-do-well thou art, and ne'er-do-well thou wilt be. And now I won't drag on any longer toiling and moiling for thee. Be off with thee into the world and earn thy own bread. So the lad had to go out into the wide world, and he went both far and long seeking a place. But wherever he came, folk thought him too little and weak, and said they couldn't put him to use. At last he came to a merchant, and there he got leave to be in the kitchen, carrying wood and water for the cook. Well, after he'd been there a long time, the merchant had to make a journey into foreign lands, and so he asked all his servants what he should buy and bring home for each of them. So when all had said what they would have, the turn came to the scullion too, who brought in wood and water for the cook. And then he held out his penny. Well, what shall I buy with this? Asked the merchant. There won't be much time lost over this bargain. Buy what I can get for it. It is honest, that I know, said the lad. That his master gave his word to do, and so he sailed away. So when the merchant had unladed his ship and laded her again in foreign lands, and bought what he had promised his servants to buy, he came down to his ship and was just going to shove off from the wharf. Then all at once it came into his head that the scullion had sent out a silver penny with him, and that he might buy something for him. Must I go all the way back to town for the sake of a silver penny? One would then have a small gain in taking such a beggar into one's house, thought the merchant. Just then an old wife walking by with a bag at her back. What have you got in your bag, mother? Asked the merchant. Oh, nothing else than a cat. Can't afford to feed it any longer, so I thought I'd throw it into the sea. Make away with it, answered the woman. Then the merchant said to himself, Didn't the lad say I was to buy what I could get for his penny? So he asked the old wife if she would take 4 farthings for her cat. Yes, the goody was not too slow to say done, and so the bargain was soon struck. Now, when the merchant had sailed a bit, fearful weather fell on him. In such a storm there was nothing for it but to drive and drive till he did not know whither he was going. At last he came to a land on which he'd never set foot before, and so up he went into the town. At the inn where he turned in, the board was laid with a rod for each man who sat at it. The board is like a table, like the kind of a bench. It's a little old world, so I assume you wouldn't necessarily know that. It's a dining table. And next to each seat is a rod, like a whipping rod. The merchant thought it very strange, for he couldn't at all make out what they were to do with all these rods. But he sat him down and thought he would watch well what the others did and do like them. Well, as soon as the meat was set on the board, he saw well enough what the rods were meant for. For out swarmed mice in thousands. Each one who sat at the board had to take his rod and flog and flap about him, and naught else could be heard than one cut of the rod harder than the one which went before it. Sometimes they whipped one another in the face, just gave themselves time to say, "Beg pardon," and then at it again. "Hard work to dine in this land," said the merchant. "But don't folk keep cats here?" Cats, they all asked, for they did not know what cats were. So the merchant sent and fetched the cat for which he'd bought for the scullion. And as soon as the cat got on the table, off ran the mice into their holes, and folks had never in the memory of man had such a rest at their meat. Then they begged and prayed the merchant to sell them the cat, and at last, after a long, long time, he promised to let them have it, but he would have $100 for it. And that sum they gave, thanks besides. So the merchant sailed off again, but he'd scarce got good sea room before he saw the cat sitting up on the mainmast head. And all at once, again came foul weather, and a storm worse than the first, and he drove and drove till he got to a country where he'd never been before. The merchant went up to an inn, and here too the board was spread with rods, but they were much bigger and longer than the first, and to tell the truth, they had need to be. For here the mice were many more, and every mouse was twice as big as those he'd before seen. So he sold the cat again. This time he got $200 for it, and that without any haggling. So when he'd sailed away from that land and got a bit out at sea, there sat Grimalkin again, the cat, suddenly has a name, at the masthead. And the bad weather began at once again, and the end of it was he was again driven to a land where he'd never been before. He went ashore up to the town and turned into an inn. There, too, the board was laid with rods, but every rod was an ell and a half long, as thick as a small broom. And the folks had said that to sit at meat was the hardest trial they had, for there were thousands of big, ugly rats, so that it was only with sore toil and trouble one could get a morsel into one's mouth. 'Twas such hard work to keep off the rats. So the cat had to be fetched from the ship once more, and then folks got their food in peace, and then they all begged and prayed the merchant for heaven's sakes to sell him his cat. For a long time he said no. At last he gave his word to take $300 for it. That sum they paid down at once and thanked him and blessed him for it into the bargain. Now, when the merchant got out to sea, he fell a-thinking how much the lad had made out of the penny he'd sent him with. Yes. Some of the money he shall have, said the merchant to himself, but not all. Me it is that he has to thank for the cat I bought, and besides, every man is nearest to his own self. But as soon as ever the merchant thought this, such a storm and gale arose that everyone thought the ship must founder. So the merchant saw there was no help for it, and he had to vow that the lad should have every penny. And no sooner had he vowed this vow, than the weather turned good, and he got a snoring breeze fair for home. So when he got to land, he gave the lad the $600, and his daughter besides, for now the little scullion was just as rich as his master, the merchant, and even richer. And after that the lad lived all his days in mirth and jollity. And he sent for his mother and treated her as well or as better than she treated himself. For, said the lad, I don't think everyone is nearest to his own self. And there we go. That is The Honest Penny from Tales of Fjeld. From the Fjeld. GS says Mum's going to lose it. Yeah, throw a bucket of silver in the tarn just because it's stolen. Holly's House says, goodness, can't even let the cat go free and see if it can fend for itself. Nope, into the sea with you. That was exactly my thought. Like, why? The cat is a hunter. Let it hunt. Holly's House says, the cat's an invasive species. Now, goodbye, native birds. GS says, explain every man is nearer to himself. In other words, like, you need to take care of the things closest to you and no one's closer than you. In other words, every man should be most concerned with himself and the care of himself. Because nobody else is going to take care of them. But the point of the story is that, you know, he took care of others and thought of others first, and for that he became wealthy. Which, of course, is how you know the world works. Like, I like the moral. It's a beautiful moral, but, like, it's plainly not the case. Not even in that time. Holly's House said, man, if only that merchant had become a cat breeder and would be a gazillionaire. It's a good point. Like, if these places have such problem with rats and mice and they've never heard of cats, ship some cats around. Gia says, thank you, boy, that went over my head. I mean, idioms tend to, right? Like, if you didn't grow up with an idiom, it doesn't necessarily mean anything to you. But yeah, I mean, it's basically that, you know, there's nothing wrong with being self-centered, and then the conclusion is, you know, of course you can be nearer to other people, care for other people. Gia says, yes, as if there was any shortage of cats. I do wonder, because, like, there's always foreign lands in fairy tales. And, like, a foreign land could be Denmark, if you're in Norway. Like, it could be barely a distance. Or they could be referring to, you know, depending on the era here, like Paris or Spain or somewhere along the African coast. Like, there's a whole bunch of places they could be talking about. And I'm always curious, like, what is the place they're thinking of? If I had to guess, I would say I don't think a place like Iceland would have had cats at one point. I honestly don't know, but I assume not. Doesn't seem like there'd be much reason for them to. Just as I feel like an idiom. That's a good one. Well, those are all the stories I have this week. I know we traditionally do 3 tales. I'm trying doing 2 shorter ones. See if it works any better for people. If you guys want your 3 tales back, I don't know, make comments, let me know. But I assume most people are pretty indifferent. I can always do more. I'm not sure what I'll do next week, but I think we're almost done with all the tales in our Nordic Tales book. But I might circle back to the one, the writer, the collection from which we pulled, Jack of Solem and the Ganfin, which was like one of my favorite stories we ever read. I might go back to that. It's a Weird Tales from the Northern Seas is that collection, and I might read some stuff from that. They're a little longer and a little more serious tales, but I am really interested in reading more of those. I do kind of want to finish the Nordic Tales, though. GS says, yes, we must earn our 3rd tale. I don't know about that, but I mean, I guess like and subscribe, and maybe they'll get longer. I assume most people, though, have the attention span of a bee, because I do as well. So this is probably already pushing it. Well, I'm just rambling now, so I will call my day at this point. Thank you, everybody, for coming out and listening to my stories. Thank you very much, GS and Holly, for talking in the chat. And I hope you guys enjoyed our stories about the Heartless Giant and the Honest Penny. Which one did you guys enjoy more? Let me know. I'll watch you as the outro is playing and see what the responses are. For myself, I actually kind of liked Honest Penny more. I will keep the fire warm for you, and I'll see you all back here at Thursday at 6:30 for Varietal Show, where we do something a little more silly and fun. Higher energy, if that's your vibe. A couple of live writing sessions. Or I'll see you back here Tuesday at 6:30 for another Fireside Fairytale. Anyways, I'm going to go stoke the fire, keep it warm. You guys have a good sleep. Thank you for dropping by.